Hi, Mikela.
Hi, Alahanlani. I am so
Hello.
sorry. I messed that
No,
up.
you're
I have not had
fine.
that.
You're fine. Aloha, Lani. You know, I should have put it as just aloha. I don't always go by aloha, but sometimes I let it slide with people. So I'm like, I should have just went with aloha. But
Let me try that again. Aloha Lani. Did I get it?
perfect.
Great.
Um,
How I remember is that it means love goddess.
it
Aloha
does.
Lani, and that's my trick.
That's beautiful.
So Mikela Topey from Frontier Energy Inc. is our next presenter. Mikela is an environmental and economic justice advocate working to ensure energy efficient and decarbonization technologies are accessible to all. As a senior program consultant with Frontier Energy, she supports investor-owned utilities, community choice aggregators, regional energy networks, and local governments with program development and program implementation. Her areas of focus include codes and standards, workforce education and training, contract outreach and management, and community engagement. Thank you, Mikela, for being here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited to have this presentation, and also thank you everyone for joining today's presentation. Can folks see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. So thank you again, everyone, for taking the time to attend this presentation. For today, I will be talking about how key components of community organizing can spur heat pump water heater adoption. This presentation is more of a thesis in regards to the day-to-day partners that I engage. And the goal for this conversation is to really highlight that all people, not only just community organizers, can institute these practices to motivate and foster a movement for heat pump adoption. So I'm going to use some words interchangeably. So when I say community members, I definitely mean us. I mean folks that are working in the energy space and really striving for equity. And then when I say movement, I'm really talking about the policies, the programs, and the energy standards that goes to really promote positive climate change. I also want to highlight that I might be asking a few questions throughout this presentation. So folks who are in the chat, definitely please feel free to chat in and answer and also be ready to respond. So just to kick things off, I want to start off by highlighting the importance of embedding equity into your day-to-day work. So equity can take many forms and shapes, but it is important to note that the key way to ensuring you're developing either an equitable policy or program or code standard is that you're ensuring that all community members that are impacted by these programs, policies, and standards are engaged and represented into the process to enforce these items, and also are taking the process to develop them as well. We want to make sure that we're ensuring that all outcomes can benefit all community members and for future generations. And we also want to highlight that those that are charged with leading these efforts should be the ones that we also hold accountable for materializing these outcomes. So do you want to go over these high-level guiding principles? This is a way to ensure that equity and inclusion can be achieved when you lead with these principles. So first and foremost, broad awareness is key to informing those who may be impacted by a policy, program, or standard. And a way to do that is also to engage those folks, because engagement helps provide knowledge and education to key community members. And it also helps create an opportunity for community members to raise questions, to raise concerns, challenges, opportunities, and recommendations. Relationships are important because they are interpersonal, because these make community members feel like they belong and have a place in the movement to generate change. We also want to highlight and uplift partnerships that are between organizations. These are key because it's a way for us to institute solidarity amongst aligning priorities with diverse entities and helps provide a foundation to build networks of communities that are addressing similar issues. In the work that you're doing, you always want to make sure you're moving with purpose, and you can do that by making sure you're leading with impact. And you want to make sure that this impact and this purpose is recognized by all members. And also do want to highlight, lead with positive impact, not negative impact, because we want to foster positive change. I want to also highlight the importance of resiliency, because if you have a resilient movement, this means that the movement can be sustained and can stay strong when unforeseen threats impact the movement, and can be sustainable and continue to move along just in the future as well. And then lastly, also want to highlight accountability as a principle, because it is one of the most difficult principles to implement. And this is because of the fear that the work that you're doing may fail. And folks don't want to take fault if a policy or program or standard fails. But the group that does take accountability is going to be the key members that are driven to make sure the movement succeeds, or will be willing to try again if it fails. And that is what can keep a movement alive and everlasting. So for a framework for embedding equity, first, this might be controversial, but many times what I've noticed with some of my peers is focusing and leading on specifically climate building and infrastructure needs. And do want to highlight that there's definitely a need to focus on these aspects in your work. But when talking to folks who aren't engaged in this day-to-day work, we got to be mindful of communicating to them in a way of how these needs will address and support communities in a way that helps address their needs. So what does that look like? So for example, if you are working with a community that has high greenhouse gas emissions, you don't want to say, hey, here's a policy to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. And if you don't achieve it, you're going to be penaltied when you're trying to sell your home or something like that. What we want to do is make sure that we're supporting the community by providing different ways for them to either change their behaviors or buying practices, and promote how this is an opportunity to help reduce, or opportunity to reduce their utility bill or costs. We also want to make sure community-led decision solutions are driven by community needs and priorities, and ensure that's embedded in the process, because that is an opportunity to ensure that the correct responsibilities are assigned to the correct members. So what does this mean? This means, in many conversations have heard folks wanting to have or promoting that low-income communities should be adopting heat pumps, but knowing that these technologies are very expensive. So really taking a step back and thinking about who is really responsible in ensuring these technologies are accessible, and how can we make sure to either reduce costs, whether that is through funding, incentives, rebates, pilots that serve multiple households, making sure we're serving these communities the best we can to adopting these technologies. Then just want to highlight that metrics are key for tracking accountability and making sure you're keeping track of if the work that you're doing is successful or not. And then also want to make sure that we're highlighting that when we're ensuring funding and program is leveraged, it's definitely something that is needed in the beginning, but it's also important to institutionalize structures that can support a community, because funding will run out and programs will end. And then lastly, improving outcomes means that your work is iterative and can always be built upon. And strategies might need to shift based on what's happening in the market or what's happening specifically within those communities. So this was a list I created. Definitely want to hear from folks in the chat in regards to what types of roles you all play. when participating in the work that you do and where you see that yourself fits into this work. So first and foremost, the visionaries are definitely the folks that are making sure that the strategy is outlined, and you're having a goal in place that you're moving and working towards. You also have those who are builders, which are the folks that help organize and develop a plan to help meet a goal or a strategy. Then you have folks that are guides that really help work with folks individually to help teach, counsel, and advise them in regards to how to best achieve the goal or strategy outlined by the visionary. And then you have those who are organizers who are tasked with making sure people who are doing this work can work together to address issues, and constantly bringing new folks into the conversation. And then lastly, you have folks who are mobilizers who can really reduce the barrier to participating either in these policies, programs, or standards, and making sure communities have the resources, networks, and information needed to play a positive role. So definitely want to hear from folks in the chat where you feel like you're the role that you best play. I hear someone in the chat saying that they're a guide for clients, but sometimes a visionary. They've talked to a lot of people to help figure out a problem solution. And great to hear that, Sean, that you're a guide and a visionary, and it's definitely great to play a variety of different roles as well. So definitely feel free to think that over and think about where you're fit. And Casey, great to hear that you're also a builder, a guide, and it depends. And I like that folks are realizing that these are flexible roles and responsibilities to play, and it really does depend on who you're engaging and who you're working with. And Quincy, great that you're a visionary, organizer, and mobilizer. Folks, feel free to continue adding to the chat as well. Love to hear what roles you're playing in the work that you're doing. Moving on to the next slide, which is around metrics for accountability. Again, wanting to highlight that these metrics help making sure that we are moving towards a movement that is sustained and resilient and can make sure it's achieving the goals that it's set out to be. Again, these are some of the metrics I track in my day-to-day, but would love to hear from other folks on the call what other types of metrics you're tracking to making sure you're leading with equity in your work and making sure that you're meeting the goals and objectives to best support communities. So first and foremost, if we're promoting heat pumps, we have to make sure this technology is accessible to all. So really keeping track who has the ability to access these technologies. We want to move towards these technologies because they help increase health and safety, and being able to track how they've made positive impacts on communities around that as well. Though heat pumps are great for reducing energy usage, we also want to make sure we're promoting energy efficiency, also as a layered tactic on heat pumps to make sure you're driving energy efficiency and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. What has been key in getting folks motivated to participate in or accessing heat pumps is reducing energy bills. As of right now, with these technologies being expensive and where electric rates are at, there's still a huge increase in, or not a huge increase, but an increase in your energy bill when you transition to these technologies. But the hope is when gas becomes less accessible and more renewable energies come online, that we're starting to see a decrease in energy cost. Then we also want to highlight resiliency. In the state of California, many communities face power shutoffs. So we want to make sure that a community who's adopting these technologies, especially when it comes to hot water or space conditioning or heating, has the ability to get access to these technologies during various situations. We also want to make sure that we're generating a workforce pipeline that's constantly training people to stay up to date on these technologies and the best ways to install these technologies, not only for just best installation practices, but also making sure it's being done in a way that's most comfortable for the folks that are living in the home with these technologies. And then we also want to make sure we're tracking how dollars are being spent. We want to make sure that we're having the most impact by effectively spending these dollars. And we want to make sure that these dollars are spent equitably amongst different communities. We should also be tracked which communities are being served and how many communities are being served to understand if you are developing a program that is accessible to all, and then also keeping track of the types of buildings that are being served and how many buildings are being served to make sure that you're also making impact in regards to updating buildings. So I want to jump into kind of an overview of what the California Energy Code is. Also, the California Energy Code is also called Building Energy Efficiency Standards in the state of California. So one of the reasons why the Energy Code was created, because with the focus on residential and commercial buildings came to an understanding that 70% of our electricity usage and a quarter of the greenhouse gas emissions that are being emitted come from residential and commercial buildings. When this came about, we mandated the California Energy Commission, also known as the CEC, to mandate an energy code that helps adopt and increase energy efficiency of buildings and also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Our building standards are called Title 24 in California, and Part 6 is where our energy code lives. The energy code gets updated every 3 years as a way to help promote increased energy efficiency and reduce greenhouse gas emissions for newly constructed or renovated buildings. Our 2022 Energy Code goes into effect in 2023, January 1st, 2023, and we're seeing that there is, that the code is really encourage heat pump technology adoption for new construction. Heat pumps are an electric technology that helps increase efficiency, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and enables load flexibility. Currently in California, I would say that 6% of new home construction is representative in the overall market. And that when we're looking specifically at the energy code, single family homes in many climate zones have a heat pump, water heater, or a space standard. So one of the things to think about when we're thinking about the energy code is how it may impact different contractors and communities. So for consumers and home buyers who are either building or purchasing a new home, obviously an energy efficient home can help decrease utility bills. But one of the things to also note is the supply chain in regards to getting access to these technologies, and then also noting that not every person or contractor has the skill to install these technologies. So definitely we want to make sure we're supporting consumers and home buyers with getting access to this equipment and finding folks who can install and do this work. In the construction industry, we definitely want to promote quality installations and installing appliances that aligns with the California Energy Code. Part of that does create a barrier for contractors to stay up to date every 3 years of the Energy Code and staying up to date in all the new forms, inspection requirements and installation requirements and verification requirements, and staying up to date how these might differ across various jurisdictions and or neighboring cities. So really supporting contractors in getting skilled in installing these technologies and doing them in the best way possible, but also helping them navigate all these different requirements as well. And then lastly, do want to highlight that code officials are the ones that are tasked with ensuring that folks are complying and enforcing the energy code. They benefit from this because they are keeping our communities safe and healthy. But one of the things is that, sometimes code officials can be working in silos, and we want to make sure we're fostering a lot of joint coordination amongst regions, just because if we want to make sure heat pump water heaters can be adopted and heat pumps can be adopted, that we're reducing the barrier for adoption for contractors, and want to make sure contractors don't have to be aware of different requirements based on the city that they're working in. So when specifically looking at heat pump water heaters in California, again, wanting to highlight that the heat pump water heater standard is only for newly constructed single family homes. As of right now, in the California Energy Code, we don't have any mandatory requirements for installing these technologies, but we do have prescriptive requirements, which means these technologies, you have the opportunity to install them if you want to meet a higher energy efficiency rating for your building, and provides guidance on what would be needed to install these technologies to meet higher energy efficiency ratios. Do also want to highlight that specific requirements under these prescriptive measures really impact climate zone 1 and climate zone 16 in California. So climate zone 1 touches the northern coastline of California, whereas climate zone 16 is in the northern to central inland part of California. The northern zone 1 the northern side in Zone 1 tends to be a bit colder and more mountainous, and climate zone 16 has much warmer and drier weather, but definitely do have specific requirements that you have to be mindful of. So just to give you an overview of what those requirements are, if you just want to follow the most basic level of meeting the energy efficiency requirements in the energy code, you can install a 240 volt heat pump water heater, which will come with a storage tank, and these must be placed in a garage or a conditioned space. If you're in climate zones 1 or 16, a compact hot water distribution system needs to be added to your system. And if you're in climate zone 16, a drain water heat recovery system can be added or needs to be added. If you want to go above and beyond in selecting a heat pump water heater that has higher energy efficiency standards, you can install a 240 volt heat pump water heater that meets NEA's Tier 3 standards or higher. Do want to note that there is a qualified product list that is shared by NEA, also known as the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, so you can know which of the heat pump water heaters on the market meets this requirement. And again, like above, these technologies has to be stored in either a garage or conditioned space. And also, if you're in climate zone 1, a drain water heat recovery system needs to be added. Do also want to highlight what the specifics added to the climate zones 1 or 16 means that there needs to be a little bit more consideration at the start of the design process. This is because to get these additional features added, you have to work in partnership with a designer, a general contractor, a subcontractor in many cases, potentially like an electrician or plumber, and then also a HERS rater as well. And the HERS rater is really there to help support tracking the home energy rating and making sure that the energy efficiency improvements that are being made meets the Energy Star performance guidelines. So thinking about climate zones 1 and climate zone 16 for newly constructed single family homes have a little bit more work that needs to be done, and being mindful of who can, include these types of technologies in their homes as well. I do want to highlight that there are exceptions to the heat pump water heater standard. And part of that is based on the climate zones that you're in, and what what fuel is fueling your space conditioning system, especially in climate zones 3, 4, 13, and 14. Also, if you're living in a smaller unit, either that be a dwelling unit under square feet or a new dwelling unit with 1 bedroom, you don't have to install a 240 volt heat pump water heater, but do want to highlight that no matter what you're moving forward with, that you also want to make sure if you have something that has a storage tank, it's well insulated, and then all the piping work that you're doing needs to be insulated as well. So do want to highlight that, there are some barriers to heat pump water heater adoption, mainly it being expensive, which is why you're starting to see California promoting a lot of incentives and allowing incentives to be layered to afford the cost of heat pump water heaters. We also know that the heat pump water heater supply chain has been impacted. So there are definitely programs that are out there that are best working with manufacturers to help making sure we're communicating heat pump water heater demand and making sure we have a supply that meets that demand. We're also promoting a variety of different trainings for heat pump water heater installations for contractors. Also want to highlight the CSLB, our licensing board for contractors, have also passed that C20s, which mainly do HVAC work in the state of California, can also install heat pump water heaters. So making sure that there is multiple folks who can do this work and properly install heat pump water heaters. And lastly, consumers may lack awareness of how to use and maintain heat pump water heaters. And definitely there needs to be more education and training for customers to understand how to best use these technologies. So I see that I'm running close on time. So I'm going to just skip to some questions. I did highlight some resource categories in thinking about how to facilitate heat pump water heater adoption and heat pump adoption as well. But I definitely want to hear from folks who attended this presentation as well, what questions that you have.
Woo! Well, first, guys, congratulate you. Fantastic. It is so exciting to see the progress that California has made in requiring induction ranges. So people are putting their visionaries and such, and I was corresponding back and forth with Alden and Jay to let them know that they're going to get induction ranges, which I should just ask you, have you given us your address so you can get your induction range?
No, I haven't, but I'll do that. Don't worry, Sean.
Okay, so some questions I had for you were, so you started off with a strong equity focus, and then we moved essentially into what the code is requiring. And do you see places where there's a failure, where this code is going to have an inequitable response, or do you see ways in which it is creating equity? I'm curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, so that is something that I really wanted to have a discussion on in today's presentation, because what we're really seeing from the California Energy Commission, I would say for the 2025 code, is fostering more engagement with a variety of different market players, including contractors as well. And I think there's definitely a lot of I would say, as we're shifting to a new energy code, there are some major changes. We went from a 300-page energy code from our 2019 cycle to a over 500-page energy code for our 2022 cycle. And folks who have been staying up to date are definitely being vocal about how this impacts their work that they're doing. So I think there are more challenges in regards to getting up to date on this new energy code and understanding these new types of technologies. There's going to always be challenges along the way because we're moving to something new. But if we want to make sure that we're allowing for equitable adoption, I don't think we can only rely on the energy code to do that. It does require us as people to take on a community organizing type role to make sure we're making this accessible for all of our different communities. So as we see the energy code promoting heat pump water heater adoption, we should be seeing folks wanting to help either finance those technologies, provide incentives, provide workforce education and training, provide guides and resources to installing or using these technologies. So I don't want to just leave it on the energy code to determine whether or not if this would be equitable, but I want to leave it to all of us players in the market to make sure that it is equitable.
There's a question, thank you. There's a question from Philip Lee. who's asking, can a do-it-yourself consumer buy and install their own heat pump water heater?
Yeah, I've seen this question come up. So I would say this: if you are a licensed contractor yourself, then definitely feel comfortable to install it. If you are someone who is installing these technologies and not familiar with heat pump water heaters, I would promote that you get someone who's licensed to do this work, mainly because you are probably upsizing your water heater. So you want to make sure you're getting a water heater that can accurately provide you with the hot water you want to have in the mornings or nights during your showers. You're also dealing with refrigerants that can be hazardous if it's leaked. So if you're not someone who's trained on how to manage refrigerants, that could also be very scary to do if you're not skilled. And then sometimes what we've seen in some of these larger units, you probably have to build a space, so allow for more conditioned airflow to take place, or more ducted work. So if you're making actual changes to your infrastructure, you want to make sure you're doing it in a way where that infrastructure can stay standing. So would highly promote you get someone who's licensed and know what they're doing to install a heat pump water heater.
I'll add that Redwood Energy has on our YouTube site about 45 how to install videos that we've collected. And there's a few of them on heat pump water heaters, but you're absolutely right. Like, this is, but Philip, yes, you can technically do it, and there are ones that are retrofit ready now that are designed to be easier. But and then Philip was concerned, or wondering, will we have a tougher time getting supply than contractors?
Depends when. I would say right now, supply is hard. We've just seen a lot of impacts that started with COVID, that started with natural disasters, and it's really impacting folks. I think towards the end of last year, people were on a reservation list for certain manufacturers, and that list is still in place. I'm pretty sure folks have gone off the list, but it is still just tough to get those heat pump water heaters. And then thinking about when getting contractors, it's really dependent on the region you're in. I can only speak to the state of California, but places like the Bay Area have a lot of contractors who are doing heat pump water heater work, but places a little bit central or in Southern California might not have folks to install heat pump water heaters, mainly because of cost. There are definitely more wealthier people in the Bay Area, but it does usually come with extra construction costs. And usually folks in Southern California and Central Coast are really looking for just getting hot water installed and not really trying to make a transition to a new hot water system.
Yeah, the Bay Area has been great at leadership. Well, with that, we are at the conclusion, and we've got one more presentation to go. Yay, Mikela! Woo!
Thank you so much, Sean, for inviting me. I hope this was helpful. And folks, if you have any other questions, I will add my email address to the chat.
Thank you so much.